Robert Dawes was once described by the National Crime Agency as the most dangerous criminal you have never heard of. He had built a vast empire that stretched across continents, from the terraced streets of Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, England, to luxury villas on Spain's Costa del Sol, and from the cocaine fields of South America to the smuggling networks of Venezuela. For years, he evaded every law enforcement agency that came looking for him. When the National Crime Agency finally secured his conviction, senior officials described it as the most successful prosecution they had ever dealt with. Remarkably, the trial was not even held on British soil. So who exactly was Robert Dawes? How did he rise to power? And what finally brought him down? The man at the center of this story was a notorious figure in the British criminal underworld, the undisputed head of a global organized crime group, a major player in the international drug trade, and one of the most influential and feared organized criminals in modern Europe. Until the moment Spanish Guardia civil officers arrested him at his villa in Benalmádena on the Costa del Sol in 2015, Robert Dawes had managed to stay one step ahead of law enforcement for over 2 decades. This is the story of how the NCA finally caught up with him. You are watching Truth Unraveled. Robert Dawes and his brother John Dawes were both generals of what investigators would come to call the Dawes Cartel, a drug trafficking operation based in the Mansfield and Sutton and Ashfield areas of Nottinghamshire, England, from what appeared from the outside to be an unremarkable house on Tudor Street, Sutton in Ashfield. The brothers ran a multi-million-pound narcotics empire that would eventually reach across Europe and into South America. From 1991 until his arrest in 2005, there is no evidence on record that John Dawes performed a single day of legitimate work. He lived almost exclusively as a jobless man, claiming state benefits, while quietly overseeing one of the most profitable drug distribution networks in the East Midlands. His hot-headed brother Robert had already taken a more international approach. By 2002, Robert had relocated to Spain, where he began organizing large-scale shipments of cannabis resin and cocaine into the United Kingdom and across Europe. Back in England, the rest of the Dawes network was managing wholesale deliveries of amphetamines and heroin, sourced primarily from criminal networks based in Liverpool and Runcorn, 2 cities that had long served as key hubs for drugs entering the UK from continental Europe. For nearly a decade, the Dawes operation ran almost entirely undetected. Then, in 2001, Nottinghamshire Police launched Operation Normality. Working in close collaboration with the National Crime Squad and HM Customs and Excise investigators, detectives began systematically building a picture of the Dawes network. By 2003, the investigation had expanded significantly and received additional central government backing with the formal sanctioning of Operation Starburst by law enforcement agencies in London. Operation Starburst investigators confirmed that the Dawes cartel was led by 3 core figures: John Dawes, Robert Dawes, and Gary Hardy, another Mansfield man whose father had held a senior position within the command structure of a Midlands Hells Angels motorcycle gang, giving the cartel deep roots in regional organized crime going back generations. By 2001, this close-knit group was importing such enormous quantities of drugs that they developed a serious backlog. Their solution was extraordinary. Members began burying large quantities of narcotics in coded underground locations scattered across woodland in the Sutton in Ashfield area, turning Nottinghamshire's countryside into a network of covert drug storage sites. A parallel National Crime Squad investigation revealed clear financial links between large-scale drug shipments flowing in from Spain, Holland, and Belgium and the cartels run by the Dawes family and the Bestwood cartel, another Nottinghamshire-based crime group with connections stretching across the country. All roads kept leading investigators back to 2 places, Nottinghamshire and the coastline of southern Spain, where Robert Dawes remained, directing operations from a distance. When investigators turned their attention to the gang's finances, what they uncovered was staggering. More than £8.5 million had passed through gang-connected accounts between November 2002 and June 2003 alone, a period of just 7 months. Furthermore, members of the network had been recorded on more than 40 separate flights in and out of Malaga Airport and Amsterdam Schiphol over a 2.5-year period, painting an unmistakable picture of an internationally connected trafficking organization. By late spring 2003, the Dawes cartel began to unravel. John Dawes had returned to England to take a more hands-on role in operations, having lost several key members of his network to prison sentences along the way. He was arrested by Nottinghamshire detectives and brought before a jury. Over 9 weeks at trial, the court heard exhaustive details of how John and Robert Dawes had headed a ruthless criminal organization, generating more than £1 million per month from the illegal drugs trade. John Dawes and their father Arthur Dawes were both convicted. John received a 24-year prison sentence. Arthur received 8 years. Robert Dawes, however, was not in England. He had been living between Spain and Dubai, running the international arm of the operation. He was ultimately arrested at Dubai International Airport by UAE authorities, acting on instructions from Interpol and Spanish police. The arrest was connected to the seizure of over £4 million worth of cocaine intercepted near Madrid in 2007. Although there was no formal extradition treaty between the United Arab Emirates and Spain at the time, diplomatic pressure eventually led to his extradition to Spanish soil. It took until spring 2011 before Robert Dawes appeared before a Spanish judge. After completing a prison term for money laundering, the then 39-year-old was flown to Madrid and remanded into custody by a magistrate. However, in September of that year, he was released on indefinite bail by a judge at the Madrid Provincial Court. Given the lengthy sentences handed down to his brother and father, Robert Dawes had effectively won the criminal lottery. He walked free into the sunshine and immediately began building something far larger than anything he had run before. When the National Crime Agency was formally established in 2013, replacing the Serious Organised Crime Agency, one of the very first case files its senior analyst reviewed was the Robert Dawes file. It quickly became clear that Dawes had not used his freedom to go straight. Far from it. He had spent the years since his release completely reinventing himself, shifting away from regional drug distribution and establishing himself as the leader of an international cocaine trafficking network on a scale that dwarfed his original Nottinghamshire operation. The NCA immediately recognized that international collaboration would be essential. They worked closely with their Spanish counterparts in the Guardia Civil, engaged with Colombian officials, and coordinated with authorities in Ecuador and Venezuela through established law enforcement channels. Parallel investigations were also running with French, Italian, and Dutch agencies, all of whom were independently connecting their own drug trafficking cases to the same name, Robert Dawes. His operation was complex, far-reaching, and meticulously organized, involving corrupt officials at multiple levels across several countries. He also made extensive use of encrypted communication systems, an approach that posed significant and unprecedented challenges for investigators attempting to intercept his communications. This case became one of the first major investigations in the United Kingdom to extensively document the use of encrypted communications by an organized crime group. The crucial breakthrough came in April 2013 through covert intelligence gathered by NCA undercover operatives who had successfully infiltrated a network known as the Cartel de los Soles, the Cartel of the Suns. This organization was embedded within the Venezuelan armed forces, spanning the Army, Navy, Air Force, and National Guard from the lowest ranks to the highest levels of command, and was frequently protected by, coordinated with, or in some cases directed by political actors within the Venezuelan government. This intelligence triggered the launch of a major joint undercover operation conducted in close coordination with French authorities. By September 2013, that operation produced its first major result. A flight arrived at the Paris airport carrying 32 suitcases packed into its cargo hold. French detectives, acting on NCA intelligence, confirmed the aircraft had landed and tracked the suitcases to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where they were being prepared for distribution across Europe. Inside those suitcases was 1.3 tons of cocaine, one of the largest single seizures ever recorded in France. The consignment was split into 4 separate shipments destined for different corners of Europe. French agents followed 300 kilograms loaded onto a lorry heading toward Naples, Italy. That vehicle was intercepted in Germany, and 2 representatives of the Camorra, the powerful Neapolitan organized crime network, were eventually arrested and charged, along with the lorry driver. The significance was considerable. The Camorra, typically a dominant force in European drug logistics, were here merely purchasing product from the Dawes network, which controlled the cocaine's entire distribution chain from South America into Paris. The Dawes operation was operating at a level above even the Camorra. The Paris seizure sent shockwaves across European organized crime and led to approximately 50 arrests in Venezuela alone, exposing a deep level of corruption at the country's airports on both sides of the operation. But despite the scale of the success, Robert Dawes himself remained free. More work was needed to place him directly and provably at the center of the trafficking operation. Over the following 2 years, the NCA's dedicated team gradually assembled a comprehensive intelligence picture of Dawes' entire operation, the structure of his network, the identities of his key associates, their communication patterns, financial flows, and the decision-making hierarchy within the organization. This painstaking analytical work ultimately directed investigators to a hotel in Madrid in 2015. By that point, the Guardia Civil had been monitoring Dawes' communications for some time. However, the advanced encryption systems his network used had rendered conventional telephone intercepts almost completely useless. Investigators therefore reverted to fundamental police work, continuous physical surveillance. Officers tracked Dawes' movements and identified a critical meeting scheduled at a luxury hotel in Madrid. With only hours to prepare, a surveillance plan was hastily put together. Robert Dawes was not in Madrid for a holiday. He was there on serious business, meeting with 2 foreign nationals, a Colombian called Zapata, described as a high-level member of the Cali Mafia from Colombia, and a Venezuelan national called Rincon, a lower-level criminal operative within the broader network. The Guardia Civil faced an immediate tactical challenge. How could they monitor what Dawes was saying inside a busy hotel lounge and capture it as usable evidence? NCA officers had brought sensitive recording equipment, and technicians positioned themselves close enough to capture the conversation. What followed was a 2-hour discussion in which Dawes openly discussed the full scope of his criminal activities. He spoke about the Paris cocaine seizure in explicit and boastful detail, describing it as the biggest operation his crew had carried out the previous year.
Crashed. It's all over the news. You don't see it.
Yeah, well, I saw it as well.
It's the biggest one they ever have.
And that's been to you.
From Venezuela. It's the biggest one they ever been in Paris to Paris.
To Paris.
So to go.
De Venezuela que volvieron ahora de decirte.
Sí. If he goes to if he knows anybody in Venezuela, they know that story. That's the biggest story there last year. Every fucking police involved from Europe is talking to Venezuela. Many people have problem in Venezuela.
He discussed high-level corruption across multiple countries, named key individuals within his network, outlined future trafficking plans, and spoke about how his organization operated with a frankness that stunned investigators listening in real time. In the recording made that day, Robert Dawes can be heard saying of the Paris seizure, "It's all over the news, the biggest one they ever, from Venezuela to Paris." If he knows anybody in Venezuela, they know that story. The biggest, police involved from Europe, talking to many, many people. It was a eureka moment. Dawes had broken his own cardinal rule: never brag about specific operations. As investigators later reflected, had that conversation not taken place, Dawes would have been in a very strong position to defend himself in court. The significance of what he had said, and who he had said it to, was enormous. What followed was complicated by a change in Spanish law. Although the recording had been lawfully obtained, a recent ruling by the Spanish Constitutional Court meant it was initially not admissible under the legal framework that existed at the time. However, when new legislation was subsequently passed, Spanish authorities were finally able to share the covert recordings with French prosecutors. The path to prosecution was open. The Spanish authorities took the arrest of Robert Dawes extremely seriously. In the early hours of a morning in 2015, a Guardia Civil tactical unit carried out a coordinated dawn raid on Dawes' home in Benalmádena, a coastal town in Malaga province on Spain's Costa del Sol. A large number of officers in full ballistic protective gear, supported by an armed Hummer vehicle, surrounded the property before forcing entry. Simultaneously, officers raided a sprawling estate owned by Dawes in nearby Ogen, which featured a purpose-built lake stocked with ornamental fish, reportedly worth up to £400 each. A vivid illustration of the extraordinary wealth accumulated through 2 decades of international drug trafficking. Dawes was arrested and the extradition process to France was set in motion. However, the November 2015 terrorist attacks in Paris, one of the deadliest attacks on French soil in modern history, plunged the French justice system into crisis and delayed Dawes' trial by more than 3 years. He sat in a French prison cell as lawyers argued, appeals were filed, and the legal process moved slowly forward. Dawes was not prepared to accept his fate without a fight. His legal team mounted an aggressive defense. Documents emerged in court that purported to originate from a Spanish judge, claiming that the hotel recording had been obtained illegally, an apparent attempt to have the case thrown out entirely. Investigators quickly established that these documents were forgeries, deliberately fabricated to undermine the prosecution's central evidence. Dawes maintained throughout that he and his family had made their money from a range of legitimate businesses in Spain, including furniture manufacturing, window installation, management consulting, and property investment. When the audio recording of the Madrid hotel conversation was played to the judges, Dawes offered a remarkable explanation. He claimed the entire conversation had been an elaborate performance, a deliberate fiction designed to convince Spanish police that he was a major criminal, thereby triggering his arrest and bringing what he described as heavy-handed surveillance to an end. When asked why he had then remained in a French prison for 3 years without revealing this to investigators, Dawes stated only that his lawyers had advised him to stay silent while appealing the admissibility of the recording. The judges were not persuaded. In December 2018, Robert Dawes was convicted of drug trafficking and conspiracy charges and sentenced to 22 years in prison. Of 2 other British nationals tried alongside him, Nathan Wheat was convicted on 6 separate charges and jailed for 13 years, while a third defendant, C. Price, was acquitted. 3 Italian nationals were also convicted in connection with the broader trafficking network. In a later separate proceeding, Dawes received an additional 5 years for his role in introducing the forged documents into his own defense, bringing his total sentence to 27 years. The operation that brought down Robert Dawes also successfully targeted another significant figure in his network. Roy Livings, a British national and suspected senior associate of Dawes, was arrested in July 2014 after 157 kilograms of cocaine was seized from a Gibraltar-registered boat, the Gloria of Granada, moored in Setúbal, Portugal. Livings was the director of several companies registered in the United Kingdom that sold encrypted SIM cards, the very technology the Dawes network had relied on to evade law enforcement, to clients in Belgium, Holland, and Spain. A previous director of one of those same companies was Nader Bobo, a major figure in the European underworld, who was assassinated in October 2012 as he left a hotel in Antwerp, Belgium. Bobo's murder triggered a wave of 14 retaliatory killings across Holland and abroad, a cascade of violence that drew the urgent attention of law enforcement agencies across Northern Europe. Today, Robert Dawes continues to protest his innocence from prison. A well-produced blog, regularly updated on his behalf, documents his legal challenges and presents his version of events to anyone willing to read it. Whether his appeals will ever succeed, whether any court will reconsider the evidence and reach a different conclusion, remains uncertain. But for the detectives at the National Crime Agency, who spent years tracking him across 3 continents, from the back streets of Nottinghamshire to the corridors of Venezuelan military power, the verdict handed down in Paris in December 2018 represented something clear and final: the end of one of the most dangerous criminal careers in modern British history, and the most successful conviction the NCA has ever achieved.